Before we get started today, I want to say thank you for every single like, comment, recommendation, and a very special thank you to my listener support group. If you like what we do here at Off the Deep End Podcast, please consider checking out the listener support tab on our channel's anchor link. Without you, we would not be able to continue the great work we're doing with these conversations, breaking down boundaries and helping heal each other by sharing our stories, our trials, our tribulations, and how we process them. Let's jump straight into this episode.
Are you thinking about making a podcast? Spotify has a platform that lets you make one, and if I can figure it out, you definitely can too. You can create your own content all in one place for free with zero hangups and even earn money as soon as you get started. Spotify lets you record and edit episodes from your phone or computer so you can go mobile, just like I enjoy to do. My favorite thing about it is that you can create video episodes if you wish and upload them to wherever podcasts are heard. You can even set up subscriptions or, if you're like me, listener support options for listeners to help you grow. I 10 out of 10 recommend the Spotify for Podcasters app. Or, why don't you just step over to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started on your own podcast. What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Off the Deep End Podcast. I'm joined today by my brother Brandon, and I'm super excited for him to talk about the military with me and to go over a couple different things that normally are not talked about. Military service in general does not get enough light. So in this episode of Service and Sacrifice, we're going to be diving into these different lights. Thank you so much for joining me, my brother.
Thank you for having me.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. Well, let's start with the start. What was it like for you growing up?
My life was pretty interesting. I was born in Roanoke, Virginia, and my parents divorced when I was pretty little. I think I was 3, and then when I was 6, so my mother was murdered. So I had a pretty unique growing up experience due to the fact that my father was like the prime suspect of my mother's murder for my entire almost my entire life up until probably 2008. The DNA came back, and another person who was already in prison, who had been in prison for like 25 years, was actually the person that committed the murder, along with another murder. And my father was exonerated, but that took a heavy toll on him, being not accused per se, but basically he was a suspect, and people treated me different and treated him different and treated our family different and things like that. And that was kind of unique. And then due to that, because of that, my father moved us to the island country of Antigua when I was a kid. I was probably 10 when I moved there, right after I finished the 5th grade. So I actually grew up in the Caribbean when I was in 6th and 7th grade. And I went to a Catholic school down there where you'd have to wear a uniform, and the headmaster and the different brothers and things like that that were at the school would like smack you with rulers and beat you on the butt if you did anything like really bad and things like that. So it was kind of a unique experience.
Oh, man. With the Caribbean, how beautiful was it over there?
Oh, it was awesome, man. It was, definitely a really cool experience. And I still keep in touch with some of the folks that I knew when I was a kid that lived down there. And I actually have a friend who runs a kite surfing school on Jabberwock Beach, which is like a famous kite surfing spot in the world. And a couple other friends who have very unique lives that I follow on Facebook and Instagram and things like that. So it's really neat. And I also lived there when I came back to Virginia when I was in the 8th grade, and finished out high school in Roanoke. But then as soon as I graduated from high school, I actually moved back down there and lived there for a year and rented jet skis and worked on a parasailing boat for about a year. And then I came back to Virginia and tried to go to college. And that's another story we can get into.
Yeah, so what happened with that?
So I came back here in 1997 and went to a small private school out in Franklin County, Virginia called Ferrum College. And I rushed well, not rush, but I joined a fraternity and just definitely didn't have my head on straight during that time. Where partying and things like that were more important to me than doing the academics. So about halfway through my second semester at Ferrum, I dropped out just because I felt like I was wasting my dad's money because it was a private school and it was super not super expensive, and I was not taking advantage of anything there except for drinking and things like that.
Mm. Yeah, well, you know what? I'm glad you knew what you wanted. So where did you leave to after there?
So in 1998, I dropped out of Ferrum, and then I actually made an attempt to join the Navy. So I had a friend of mine that I grew up with. We were actually born at the same time in the same hospital room, and our parents were friends. And he had a kind of a rough life also, and he decided to join the Navy right out of high school. So he was a an aviation electronics technician down in Jacksonville in a squadron, and he was doing really well. And I ran into him, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool. Like get out of Roanoke, go join the Navy." He had like a brand new Jeep chair, a brand new Jeep Wrangler. He was doing really well, so I kind of saw that, and I was like, I want to do that. I want to get out of here and do something different. Where I'd actually seen Navy ships pull into port down in Antigua, and it looked like a cool thing. Like you get to pull into a Caribbean island and go on a port call and things like that. But that didn't work out very well for me because I ended up being on carriers.
Ooh. So what was it like for you when you first joined?
It was different. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I had gotten a pretty good ASVAB score, so they had a lot of different job openings, and I was really interested in like special warfare, like go being a SEAL or SWIC or EOD or diver or anything like that. So when they gave me my job sheets, radioman was one of the options, and the A school was in San Diego, so I thought that would be really cool. And then I knew that like SWIC and Bud school were in also in Coronado, so I was like, I could go to A school, go to RMA school, and then go to SWIC or Buds or whatever I thought at the time that I was going to do. And when I got to boot camp, and this is September of 1999, the RDCs asked us like, who here is going to RMA school? And like, I think I raised my hand and looked around, and I saw one other person raise their hand. And then the RDC started laughing. He's like, "You're not going to RMA school. You're going to ITA school here in Great Lakes." And of course, at the time, I think I was 21, and I'm like, "Well, that violates my contract, so like that's not happening. You guys are gonna have to let me out or whatever." And then I like got beat and pushed up against a wall or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, that kind of changed my plans. And then, graduating in boot camp in November of 99, it was starting to get very cold. And then I knew I was going to be spending the entire winter up there going to ITA school. And
Oh my God. That had to be miserable. That's a miserable thought because I went through A school in November. Yeah, November to December timeframe. And it was cold as hell.
yeah, it was fun though. I really enjoyed ITA school. I met, some of my best friends that I still am very close with today. We actually were in the same class, and we picked the same ship coming out of A school. So the majority of all the guys in my A school class when they graduated all got either large deck amphibs or aircraft carriers in Norfolk or Jacksonville at the time. I think the JFK was still around at the time. So all the males in our A school class went to carriers and large deck amphibs. So me and my best friend Chris Christopher went to the George Washington together, and I know you served on the GW, and
Oh
yeah,
yes.
that was my first ship in Norfolk. Before they went to Japan. So
Yeah, good old
four
G-Dub. Oh my goodness.
4.5 years on the George Washington. I did three, complete deployments, 2 yard periods, and it was tough. It was arduous, and I didn't know at the time that I wanted to stay in the Navy because it was not what I, thought it was going to be, but it ended up turning out to work out really well for me. And my chain of command in my division sent me to a C school, which allowed me to get a really good NEC, which is like our communications. Now it's called Journeyman Communications course, but it used to be called Transmission Systems Technician. So I had an NEC as an E5 that allowed me to reenlist for 6 years and get $35,000. And I did it in a tax-free zone on our third deployment. And I was able to take that money and invest it with Edward Jones. So I had a really good mentor at the time who's still, a person that I look up to a lot and who helped me out a lot throughout my career, was a chief warrant officer. He's like, hey, you should take that money and put it in something. Don't just go blow it and all that. So that ended up working out real well for me.
Good, good. I'm glad you listened to his advice. I think being in financial literacy and being financially stable are two of the most important things for human beings to do, especially when they're in the military, severely underpaid.
Yeah, yeah, and of course I've seen other kids, other sailors, and things like that that I've served with get big reenlistment bonuses and go out and buy cars or whatever else. So
Dodge
that was
Charger.
yeah. So I was really fortunate to have Chief Warrant Officer Mark Banks as a I think it was his first tour as a warrant. So he was a chief prior to, and he looked out for myself and some other folks in our division, and you know, like I say, to this day, and it's been probably 20 years. He's a guy that I look up to a lot and was a mentor to me.
That's excellent. I'm glad you found mentors to latch onto. I found so many great human beings who inspired me to reach the top of my own mountains and to better myself as well. I think it's like one of the most priceless things that is a part of the military is latching on to great people who inspire you to do great things as well.
Yeah, that's something I would like to talk about in our discussion. That's kind of something that I kind of found probably over the last 3 years or so, that I've been on active duty, that I really enjoy doing that for the younger folks and things like that.
Yeah, shoot, get right into it, man.
Yeah, well, I was gonna, kind of tell you about my career because it's kind of been unique as far as after I finished up the tour on the George Washington, in 2004, I went to United States Joint Forces Command, which is a four-star combatant command, as an E5, and checked on board there. And as soon as I checked on board, they were like, so you have two options. One, you can go to physical security, or two, you can go to Iraq. And I was like, well, I did the TAD to ship security on the ship, and I'm not really, excited about guarding gates or whatever for 6 months. So I was like, I'll take the Iraq opportunity. And at that time, it wasn't a the Navy's individual augmentee program wasn't really like a thing. Like, I don't even know that it was called an IA or anything at that time. So myself and another IT2 both kind of got volunteered for this deployment, and we went down to Fort Benning, Georgia, and went through several weeks of what the Army at the time called the CONUS Replacement Center, CRC, or something like that. So they
Mhm.
issued us all of our desert gear and weapons and gave us training and things like that. Kind of like a little 2 week boot camp in the Army. And we were the only Navy guys going to that. And the majority of the folks were Army officers that were basically augmenting other units in Iraq at the time. And so this is 2005. So it's still kind of still pretty crazy there. And we deployed to multinational forces Iraq at Camp Victory, Baghdad, and we were on there, and that was kind of like where all the high ranking generals and things like that. So at the time, so for my IP community in the Navy is kind of a newer. a newer thing probably over the last 20 years. So I actually worked for Rear Admiral Susan Brown at the time, was like the senior IP officer in the Navy, and she was kind of like the general's J6 or S6 or whatever it was at MNF Iraq. And then there were some other officers in that shop that went on to become admirals and things like that. So I had, I was very fortunate as an E5 to work for, at the time, Lieutenant Commander Donnell Barrett, who retired as a Rear Admiral upper half and had commanded some of the communication stations and things like that, and was kind of a major player in the Navy IP community, or probably one of the best, in my opinion, that I've had the opportunity to work with over the last 20, almost 24 years. And she now has her own mentorship and kind of leadership. She wrote a book, and then she does a lot of like daily mentorship nuggets, and I follow her on Facebook and LinkedIn and things like that. So a really cool lady who's still mentoring and leading and putting out good guidance to the troops even now in retirement. So that's another thing that I really admire about her. But yeah, so after the Iraq deployment in 2005, by this time I'm married, or I'm almost getting married. I'm engaged, and my wife and I are living together. I bought a townhouse down in Virginia Beach, and so when I got back from Iraq, we ended up getting married in 2006. And ended up having our first kid. My daughter Kaylee was born in April of 2007, so I became a dad, and and so that was exciting. And then after that tour, I went to Naval Special Warfare Mobile Communications Team. Now has changed. It's now called Tactical Communications Command. But basically, they would take a bunch of ITs and ETs, send them to SEER school up in Brunswick, Maine, and then a bunch of different special warfare courses. So we got to go through the driving and gun shooting course with Blackwater before Blackwater became like a bad thing. And that was, probably one of the best schools that I've ever gotten to go to. And then, almost a year worth of training to support Naval Special Warfare. So at that tour, probably looking back on my career now, was the most exciting and most rewarding opportunity for me, because I was able to, attach to SEAL Team 2. So myself and, 13 or 14 other ITs and ETs being led by a chief got attached to SEAL Team 2. And then I was attached to one troop, which is like their Alpha and Bravo platoon. So we ended up deploying to Baghdad in 2009 and did a deployment there at a base, and our guys got to do some really cool missions. So that was I don't know exactly if this is like confidential or classified or anything like that. I really don't think it is, because that troop, along with like the CO, XO, and OPSO, and the leadership of the team, were attached to a JSOC mission. So we were doing like the high speed low drag operations and things like that. And I actually had the opportunity as a tech, as an IT, to actually go out on the helo to do some communications stuff when they were out on target and things like that. So that was a really cool, rewarding experience for me.
Wow. Now that is, I don't know what's more badass, you hanging out with the SEALs or you becoming a dad. I want to talk about both, first of all. Wow. Congratulations on becoming a father. That has to be exceptionally one of the most important things out there that could ever happen to a human being. So being a dad in the military is not something we normally talk about here, but I'd love if you could shed some light on it. What are some of the obstacles and some of the unique experiences that only a father in the military has?
Well, leaving your child, leaving your wife and your kids when they're babies to go through, schools and deployments and workups and things like that. That's, difficult. So at the SEAL team, it's not the same as being like on a ship where you're going out to sea for like Com2X and JTFX. They have a bunch of different trips. So the SEALs get to go to Kentucky, Mississippi, Arkansas, out to Nevada, California, and different things like that to do different training, special operations, urban combat, or mount, or shooting courses, or whatever the case may be. So we, as mobile comm team guys, we got to go with the troops or the platoon, however they had it broken down, to, we would set up like a SATCOM mobile kit to be able to provide IP services to the guys and to the troop leadership and things like that. So they'd be able to get on their SIPRNet, NIPRNet, make phone calls, print, set up a small little network so the SEALs can do like intelligence planning and things like that. So I'm doing all this as my wife is staying home and raising this baby by herself because she doesn't have any family members here in the Virginia Beach area. My wife and I are both from Roanoke, Virginia. So she didn't have her mom and dad or sister and brother and things like that here. I mean, they definitely came down and helped out when they could. But I think that's another thing that a lot of folks don't talk about being a military spouse or a military kid is you don't have your aunts and uncles and cousins and things like that living in the same town as you do. So, we end up, making really good friends with our neighbors and, you know, friends in the area that become like aunts and uncles and things like that to your family. So it's tough, man. It's tough for the kids, it's tough for the spouses, and it's tough for the service members, because a lot of the times I would be gone and my daughter would, speak for the first time or walk for the first time, and I might necessarily have been there. But nowadays with cameras and video and things like that, that makes it a lot cooler.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just want to say a quick thank you to your lady and your daughter and all the military families out there that are the real sacrifice portion of what service and sacrifice is all about. It's often talked about that, the military member goes and deploys and serves our country, but it's not said enough how amazing military families are. I don't think that we'd have a military if it wasn't for the military families. It would just not be a thing. We'd have so much more crisis on our hands if it wasn't for the amazing, overwhelming support that they always provide. What is one of your main takeaways from working around the special warfare community?
Um, Completely different than being in the Fleet Navy. I mean, I was very, very, very fortunate for that tour working with SEAL Team 2 because I just happened to have some of the best officers, chiefs, and operators that you could possibly work with. So, like, for example, at the time, my CMC was Master Chief Derek Walters, who's now this or was the Sixth Fleet Master Chief. So he was the first SEAL to become a Fleet Master Chief, and I believe he's the first African American to be a fleet, but I may be mistaken on that. I know it was a big deal when he got assigned to become the fleet master chief. So I got to work with Wally as he was the CMC and I was the expeditionary warfare, coordinator for the PIN for that program for SEAL Team 2. So that was a really cool experience, sitting on a board with a CMC who, is now like the top of the food chain as far as senior enlisted um just master chiefs in general. Like I believe he finished the fleet master chief tour and then went on back down to MacDill, and I think he's at CENTCOM as like a senior enlisted advisor type combatant command type of job. And then my CO at the time was Commander Matt Stevens, and he became an 06 and then commanded one of the groups and also commanded Naval Special Warfare Unit out of Bahrain. So, and he is a top of the line guy. He was at Dam Neck earlier on in his career as a lieutenant. My XO was is now an '06 that's already commanded a group and things like that. And, first name, hey, Brandon, how's it going? How's your family? And things like that. A lot different than the Fleet Navy, a completely different world, different subculture and things like that. So that was, a really cool tour.
Excellent. Do you encourage people to branch away from the normalcies and the redundance that comes with the Navy, the normal Navy? So like going into the brown water is a culture.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think if you have the opportunity, if you're the rate, your rate allows it, which a lot of you can pretty much go to Naval Special Warfare or Navy Expeditionary Combat Command and do a tour there. Pretty much doesn't matter your rate. I mean, have a little bit of everything. Definitely. I think the one drawback to that is sometimes folks go to those commands and then they think that they are something that they're not. So don't go to NSW or whatever and start thinking that you're an operator with the hair and the whole thing. But yeah, you got to be able to separate those two things. You got to be able to transition to go back to be on a ship and think about doing maintenance and things like that. So,
Mm. Well,
but
I know there's a lot of
so,
fun that comes with that. Any transitional period it can be exceptionally difficult, especially when you're leaving a job that you love to a job that you kind of love.
right, yeah. So I had a after my tour at Mobilecom team, that ended up being 4 years. So I had been applying for the limited duty officer program, and then going back to Mark Banks, he was my OIC at Mobilecom team. So when Mobilecom's, before it became its own '05 command, it was ran by a warrant officer or an LDO. So majority of my career, I've always had either a warrant or an LDO as like my division officer, department head, or OIC. So Mark Banks is now a CWO4. He's the OIC of Mobilecom team. And after I did the deployment with SEAL Team 2, my son was born, and that was in April of 2010. So I come back and I put in a request sheet to go back to SEAL Team 2 and give me an opportunity to go back to a school that I had failed before. So I have failed quite a few things throughout my career that I don't really talk about to a lot of people, but I failed the ITC School of System Administrator because the majority of my career I'd been kind of a communicator, right? So I had not been a network computer guru like most ITs are. So I went back to system administrator school the summer of 2010 and I passed it finally. And then they let me go back to SEAL Team 2 to kind of get a leadership position. And I became the leading petty officer for my detachment of mobile comm folks. And then in the beginning of 2011, when I found out that I had gotten selected for LDO on my third package, an opportunity came out to go deploy with SEAL Team 10 to go to Afghanistan. And I'm thinking this might be my only shot to do that because, as far as I know, that might be going away anytime. And I'm got selected for LDO, so I know I'm pretty much going back to the regular Navy. So I deployed with SEAL Team 10 and this small group of random like SEALs that were going to go over there and train the Afghan partnering unit. So this was like April of 2011, and we're all on this base in Kabul, Afghanistan, training their Afghan special operations forces. So while I was there is when the Osama bin Laden um, thing happened. And then while I was there, Extortion 17 happened. So unfortunately, we lost a bunch of like our top tier, high speed, low drag special operations forces, along with the Afghan partnering unit. So I was kind of voluntold, hey, you're going to take these guys up to Bagram so they can be there for this ramp ceremony. And that was probably one of the biggest impactful things that happened to me in my naval career was seeing the ramp ceremony for Extortion 17. And this is another thing that I have not really ever discussed this with anybody, but it's been 13 years since then. So in 2011, we lost 33 heroes, and the majority of them were from Virginia Beach, from our top tier unit that's here in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia. And one of the guys that was on that, actually, him and I went to ITA school together, and he became a SEAL. And he was, probably one of the most highly respected guys that, I knew about at the time. And then another one of our IT1 Jared Day, passed away in that. And so my job was basically to escort this group of Afghan partner unit folks up to Bagram so they could attend the ramp ceremony. Well, meanwhile, Ramadan is going on, and I really didn't know the ins and outs of Ramadan. But basically, when all those Afghani guys get up in the morning, we have to get over to the chow hall and feed them before the sun comes up in the morning, and then we have to go back and take care of all the business that we have to do. And then once the sun sets, take them back to the chow hall to allow them to eat, because they're fasting during the day. They can't drink water, they can't eat anything, and that's part of their religion. So I didn't know what I was getting myself into when I was doing this, because first of all, the chow hall is only open from this time to this time, and I have to go make special accommodations for a group of Afghani guys that don't look like the normal Afghan National Army. These guys all have full beards and have, like, op camis and things like that. They don't have any patches, they don't have any flags, because they're their version of their special operations and things like that. So that was a very unique experience for me. And then I was there on the flight line when they hauled those all the caskets and things like that. So that was a uh very unique experience in my life that I still think about a lot, that that happened while I was over there. I mean, I didn't really have anything to do with it except for escorting these folks around, but it was kind of a unique experience.
Well, it's just one of those huge things that you kind of never forget. I'll never forget when they brought home a SEAL when we were stationed in Coronado, and I've seen different types of processions and stuff, but I never. I'm getting chills right now just thinking about it. Thinking about one of our nation's heroes brought home under that flag. It is a sombering, amazingly heartbreaking experience to observe. I'll ever be the same after watching it, because I have a more invigorated respect and appreciation for people who do go downrange every single day.
Yeah, yeah, that was a very impactful moment in my naval career. So meanwhile, getting back into, like, hey, by the way, you have to leave here and you have to come back to Virginia Beach and get commissioned and now go back to an aircraft carrier. And that was tough for me, being in that community for 4 years and really kind of adapting to that culture. To now, hey, by the way, you've been applying for this program, and now you're going to be an ensign, and you're going to have to go to a carrier and be a divo and things like that. So I come back from Afghanistan, I believe in the latter part of August of 2011. So I was only over there for about 4 months. But that was again, that was a very unique deployment. Like, we were in civilian clothes, I think 99% of the time, and basically training and things like that, hauling these guys around, working logistics to get people from to different bases to replace people and things like that. So that was a unique experience. But anyway, so I'm back in Virginia Beach, and I get commissioned in November 1st of 2011, and then head up to Newport to go to the LDO CWO school, or what they call Mustang University. So I'm a first class, so I'm kind of like the majority of those guys are all chiefs and things like that. So that's always kind of been a thing for me. as I only came up for chief once, and I didn't make it, and that was coming back off of my 2010 deployment with SEAL Team 2, and a lot of my peers went through initiation and put on chief, and then the next cycle, the beginning of 2011, I found out I got picked up for LDO. So super important. I'm very proud of myself, my family, everybody's, super stoked to get commissioned, but I never had the opportunity to wear the anchors or go through that experience. And that's one of those things. I won't say I regret it, but I would have liked to have had that opportunity.
100%. 100%. I don't think there's anything like it for the people who have made chief. They talk about often. It's like a brotherhood, a fraternity, that a certain different level of the Navy that you don't normally hear talked about. It's just that kind of level, that kind of spot that you finally are able to stand on.
Yeah. Um, so basically finish up Mustang school up in Newport. Super cool experience. Because you get people from every single community in the Navy that are, either putting on LDO or putting on Chief Warrant Officer. So you have EOD folks, you have CBs, you have SEALs, you have SWIC warrants, and then every other rate that has an LDO or warrant program available to it. So I met a lot of people that I wouldn't have normally met, on an aircraft carrier or wherever. So that was a cool experience. And so finish up there, come back, and I check on board the George H.W. Bush as soon as she came back off of her maiden deployment. And my combat systems uh, information officer, our CISIO, which is like our O4 principal assistant, um, I was slated to be the commo of the Bush, but because I was an ensign and I was so green and brand new and things like that, they wanted to move one of the other officers that was in another division over to the commo job and put me in his division and be in charge of EDP. So EDP on a carrier is basically all the classified network stuff. So you're making sure that everybody can log on to the SIPRNet and your geek systems and all your, everything that's classified basically. So that ended up working out really well for me because my chief was like the best chief that I ever had in the Navy, as far as like somebody that worked for me, but was also training me and teaching me all kinds of stuff. And he had been around for, I want to say, around his 24-year mark at this time. So he's trying to make senior chief. And, but he was like one of the top EP chiefs on the carrier. And, that's a big deal. And then my LPO was the sailor of the year. So I had a really great chain of command in that division. So here I am, Ensign Urick, that just came from 4 years at Naval Special Warfare, in charge of all this maintenance and account creations and et cetera, upgrades, getting things installed, doing SOVOTs, doing all these things that, I had not really messed with for probably 8 years at the time, since the last time I was on a carrier. So, unfortunately, and then that's where I really got to know a lot of our bosun's mates, because the majority of all the combat systems divos go up on the bridge and start stand and watch to try to get their OD quals. So that's where I met a lot of bosun's mates that you probably know, and developed relationships with a lot of people working on the bridge watch team.
Yes,
And
the Bridgewatch team is where it's at. All right. I don't care
yeah,
what
yeah,
anybody can say that they got the best job in the Navy. There's a lot of best jobs out in the Navy, but I think was close to them every single time to those best jobs has to be the Bridgewatch team. There's nothing cooler than hanging out, driving an aircraft carrier. I've messed around so much on that ship. Oh my goodness. I remember being so bored. I would just spin the helm as hard as I can to the right and then hard I can to the left. And for some reason the ship steers straight. Don't ask me how I did it. I learned it from the best. It is what it is. But some just small stuff like that. Getting told I didn't make the coffee right when I didn't make coffee at all. And then Just the ridiculous stuff, the ridiculous supply of pieces of paper that the QMs go through when they make mistakes. You never know. You
Right.
never know. And the OSs looking at their dots. What do they even do? Who nobody knows.
So that I feel like talking about it right now and looking back on it, that's really the heart of being in the Navy is
Yes.
driving a ship out on, whether you're in the Persian Gulf, the Mediterranean, you're on the West Coast, you're in the South China Sea and things like that. I mean, that's the heart of the Navy. The majority of the small ships, everybody is a SWO, the officer wise, but on a carrier, you get a bunch of different LDOs and warrants, and then aviators and NFOs, and and you meet a lot of really cool people that you wouldn't normally work with because you kind of stay in your little bubble of combat systems or deck department or AIMD or whatever the case may be. So made a lot of really close friends. And unfortunately, about 6 months into my tour, as everything is going really well, I had a big disaster basically happen that I wanted to share with you and kind of discuss this because I've listened to your podcast and this is one of those things that I wanted to discuss with you. A friend of mine, Will Gilbert, was another LDO officer that worked with me, and he was a little bit senior. He'd been around for a while. He actually was on the George Washington earlier on in his career, and he had just put on lieutenant, and he had already done another tour at like NCTS Naples before coming to the ship. And he also had done an IA to Afghanistan, so we kind of had that in common. And we were on the same bridge team, and we also worked together, went to the same meetings each day. And then meanwhile, I told you about Mark Banks. So I followed Mark to the George Bush because he was one of the other divos in combat systems after he had done the OIC tour and Naval Special Warfare. So we're all pretty tight knit group of guys. I'm the youngest, most junior officer in the department. Most of these guys have all been in for 20 plus years and things like that. I think I want to say my commander at the time, my combat systems officer, had been in the Navy for 34 years. So he had came in the Navy like when I was born, and then became a chief in the like late 90s, and now is a '05, looking at putting on '06. So I'm the junior baby ensign of the group, and but Will was always good to me and pull me aside and be like, hey, don't brief that. It sounds like you don't know what you're talking about and things like that. Like, just kind of keep that to yourself. Like, he would provide that mentorship to me. And one day, I got a phone call, and it was on a Saturday, from Mark calling me and was like, hey, have you heard from Will? He didn't show up to duty section. And I was like, nah, I haven't heard from him. And I remember I was cooking bacon, and this is like the spring of 2012. And it was on a Saturday morning, and then he called me back, and he was like, hey man, they found Will. He committed suicide out in the woods in Chesapeake. And that, another one of those big moments of your life or your naval career where you're like, oh man, like, shit, dude, like, that's crazy. Like, you know he had kids like the same age as my kids, and he was married, and he was always like, like I said, like a real good kind of a mentor, and a kind of an older brother and things like that. So when Will passed away, they tasked me with going over to his house and helping his wife with they were setting up for a memorial service they were going to do on the ship. So they were going to bring his family and friends, and then all the ship's crew would attend this memorial service for him. And they tasked me, of course, because I'm like the junior ensign of the department, like, hey, you're going to drive his family, um, go pick his family up, bring them back on base, get to drive onto the pier, bring them up on the ship so they can attend this memorial service. And I remember going over to his house, and I was in my NWUs, the Blueberry Digital uniform, and his son came up to me and put his hands up and reached up and said, "Dad," and I freaking broke down like a little baby because he thought I was his dad,
Oh my
because
God.
he's young, he doesn't realize it, and yeah, that was another one of those big, kind of life changing moments for me, and so we did that. We came together as a department and as a wardroom and as a crew. Held the memorial service for Will Gilbert, and then here Ensign Urick is walking down the hallway, walking down the passageway, and my combat systems officer calls me in the stateroom, and he's like, "What's your experience with EKMS?" And I was like, "Damn it! I know what this is gonna turn out to be. Like I'm gonna take over. I'm gonna have to take over his division." As soon as he said that to me, and I got this like little black rain cloud kind of like popped over my head. I'm like, "Damn it!" So being an IP or IT in the Navy, one of our things is maintaining all the ComSec material for the ship, and that was Will's one of his main jobs in his division. So, hey, by the way, we're going to send you to the school, and we're going to fly you off the ship, and you're going to go to the school down here on Dam Neck base for 3 weeks, you and this other chief, and then you're going to come back and take over this EKMS vault. And I'm like, okay. And hey, by the way, I want you to call Will's widow, Westy, every day and check on her and make sure she has everything. Yeah, that's fine. No problem. So go to that school. We graduated on a Friday, and then Chief Cannon and I had to fly back out onto the ship. And the chief that was in that vault with Will was going on terminal leave. So they actually had to send a message up to the chief of naval personnel to keep this guy from going on terminal leave like a week or two, where he was supposed to have been going on terminal leave and his career in the Navy was done. They kept him on board until we flew back on. So I had to come into that vault with this chief and inventory every single piece of equipment, make sure everything is done properly. And super tedious stuff, and it was over 2,000 line items of material, and there were some problems. There were some things that we couldn't find or were missing, or whatever. But I was always taught, in the Navy and in life, is you know let somebody know senior to you before, don't keep something a secret, right? Don't be the
Yeah.
senior guy with a secret. So I'm reporting all this stuff, and at the time, our RCO, is a very senior captain. They've already commanded a deep draft amphib. They've already been an XO of a carrier, and they've already been the CO and XO of a squadron. So this is a very senior O6, and those guys are trying to put on that star, right? When you have missing or ComSec incidents and things like that, they get very nervous and they don't like that. So here I am getting screamed and yelled at by this O6 about, hey, we found this is not right, and all that. But Captain Luther was a good CO. I had a really good relationship with him from being on the bridge team. So he used to make fun of me a lot from my accent or whatever. I believe he was from Wisconsin. So I have,
He made
somewhat of a
fun of
southern.
you.
Yeah,
You're
because
from
I had a because I
Wisconsin.
have a southern because I have a southern draw. So on the bridge, come course to 275, and then he would come over like whisper like come to course 275, like making fun of my accent and things like that. But great guy. He's now the president and CEO of Navy Mutual, and you probably see him on commercials and things like that. But we got through that. We did everything right, and 3 years of being in the Navy, I've been instructing and teaching the younger officers that are coming in. So this is one of those stories that I share with them. And I hope that they take it on board, because that is one of those things that if you don't do right by it, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble and, possibly lose your naval career, have your security clearance removed, or, possibly go to jail and things like that. So
Wow. Well, there's so much to unpack there, man. Um,
Yeah.
I want to say first, I want to say I'm so terribly sorry that you lost your brother. I don't think it ever gets easy to experience loss, especially not in that way. And it happens so often. And it seems that sometimes the military doesn't talk about it. The military expects you to keep going on like nothing ever happened, and they ask unnatural things of you when this stuff happens. I think when you lose somebody, there's a grieving process that we all go through, and I just want to say, man, it must have took a serious, like a copious amount of emotional and mental fortitude to get through that moment. And I'm super thankful that you shared that. I'm super appreciative that you um the way you remember your brother is beautiful, and I really do enjoy um hearing that you powered through that moment and made everything happen. It's not easy for that type of stuff to sit on your shoulders. I've personally been there, and I'm just thankful that you were able to step in. If there was one thing you could say to him or to anybody out there who is thinking about removing themselves from the world, what would you say?
Don't do it. Call me, call your brother, your sister, your brother of the armed forces, or your buddy that lives down the street from you. Call somebody and get help. I mean, there's so many services out there now that are, you know, we can dial a couple numbers on our cell phone and be able to talk to a mental health counselor. um yeah, that it sucked, not only, you know, for his kids and his wife, and uh, it was hard. It was a difficult thing. You know, I was just recently talking to Mark. Um, you know, he's already retired. He did 30 years and retired, and he's got a GS job out in Suffolk. But you know, I was like, I don't think that ever since that time I have been right because of the. I think that's really when I started to have like anxiety.
Mm,
And you know, I wanted to share that with you too, because you know, I think the results of several key things that have happened to me in my life and my last 23 and a half years in the Navy have kind of given me these mental health conditions that I get like wrapped up into, and kind of like in a churn or whatever. I don't know if you've ever heard that
yeah.
terminology used, but it'll churn me up and things like that. And that's one of those things that I try to express to people was very difficult for me, having to take over that division from him and sit in the same desk and have the same sailors, you know, looking to me to be, you know, they're now divo, um, after, you know, what happened, with Will. But you know, fortunately, I had really great chiefs and really great first classes and second classes and third classes and seamen, and my peers on in the wardroom, other officers that, you know, I'm still very close to this day with, and you know, senior in the chain of command, that I hope, you know, realize that that was a difficult, that was a difficult thing, you know, not only for Will's family, his wife, his children, and things like that, but the other sailors in combat systems, and officers, and the chief's mess and everybody, you know. So it
Yes.
affects everybody.
Yes, man.
So
It does.
yeah, yeah. So back to that, when Chief Cannon and I graduated from that school, we kind of found out over the last couple weeks as we were going through that school that we were getting ready to have an inspection on that program, which at the time would happen every 2 years. So I believe it was 4 weeks or 30. I think it was 30 days from the day we graduated. We actually went through that inspection, and Chief Cannon, Karen Cannon, who's a Master Chief now, and she's actually on her way out. She's getting ready to retire after 30 years. She really stepped up because I had never been a manager before and managed such a large account, because on a carrier, you're going to have more pieces of equipment spread out on a CVN than, on a DDG or any other ship, right? The biggest account. So Karen Cannon really stepped up, and we got through that inspection. But then, hey, by the way, we want you to take over as the ship's information assurance manager, and we're getting ready to go through this inspection called the cybersecurity inspection compliance program. At the time, it was called the CSICP. So it was kind of like InServ, but like on the ship's information assurance for their computer networks and everything else. So,
Oh my
uh,
goodness.
yeah, so that was another thing. It was like, now I have that too. Um, and fortunately, I had some really good ITs that were way smarter than I am, or I probably ever will be, or anything like that, that, made that we got through that inspection. And at the time, and this was in 2013, when we finally passed that inspection, we had the second highest score of any ship in the Navy, with the exception of the Harry S. Truman. But the Harry S. Truman had some sort of team of contractors come on board that some command paid like several $100,000 for them to like come on board and help them, and we didn't have that. So I always say we had the best inspection of any ship up until that time, because that other ship, they had like some sort of team of contractors come on board and help them, and we didn't have that. So
Mm. Me.
yeah, so get through that inspection, get through that, put on JG, working on my information warfare qualification for, my actual community, on top of driving the ship and trying to get OD qualified and all that. So I'm trying to do all these things at the same time, go through these major inspections, and
And the
still
major emotional damage that you took a major hit to the face, man, and having to go through all that. It takes time to grieve,
it
and I don't think there
it
is enough
changed
time for that.
it changed me. I can honestly look back on that process of that 3-year tour on that carrier, that I came off that ship different than I was when I came on board.
Yeah.
In some ways good, and then some ways bad, because like anxiety and of like obsessive compulsive things, where, those are things that I'm still trying to work on now, to, grasp that and be able to control that, because I will get wrapped up on, one thing, like,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you the stories, like, if you want to hear them or whatever. It's kind of funny.
It's
It's going to
normal
be
it's normal
humorous to
to
you.
it's normal to have these tendencies after you experience a traumatic experience. It really is.
Right. So we finish up that tour on the George H.W. Bush, and I remember in our community, once you become an LDO, one of the premier things to do is to be the detailer down in Millington, Tennessee. So I have been very fortunate throughout my career that I've had really good detailers. So at the time, I want to say this is September of 2013, and we've just gone through these inspections and things like that. And I'm about 1 year out from being able to pick my orders. So I called Don Wilson, who at the time, I believe he was a lieutenant commander, and now he's an O6. He's a very senior O6, and another mentor to me, and a guy that I've been able to reach out to over the last, 12 years as being an officer, to get that, bottom line up front. Hey, I'm thinking about this. What are you thinking? Do you think that's a good idea, sir? And he's always there, not only for me, but like our entire community of information professionals and ITs in the Navy. I mean, he's a legend. So I called Don. I was like, hey, sir, I really like to go to somewhere else besides, because now I've been in Hampton Roads for like 12 or 13 years now. Yeah, 13, almost 14 years. So he's like, I got Nick Tam's pack in Hawaii. That'd be awesome. So we pick orders in Nick Tam's pack, and after we do the big 2014 deployment on the Bush, which ended up being like 9 or 10 months, it was super long. Um, Came home and I was able to pack my family up and finally move out of here for the first time. So we went out to Hawaii, and at this time, my daughter's 7.5, my son's 4.5, and we get out to Hawaii, and it's paradise and it's awesome and it's so great. We ended up getting into like a really awesome military housing community out there called Halsey Terrace. Moved into this beautiful big old house in Halsey Terrace, and started doing the rotating watch bill in Hawaii. And I know you, being a bosun's mate, has been up five and dime and 5 hours
Oh
up
yeah,
at
all the
night,
things.
balls to four, all that
Balls of
stuff. So
balls.
now,
I was just talking about the balls before. It sucks.
yeah, so we go out to Hawaii, and the kids are, in school out there. My wife's adapting to, being in Hawaii. Um, they put me on the rotating watch bill. So we're standing, 2 or 3 12-hour shifts, and then we'd have like either 24 hours or 48 hours off, and then we would stand 2 or 3 12-hour night shifts.
Mm.
So after doing that for a quite amount of time, you start to kind of get a little burnt out.
Yeah.
So so our big qualification in our community, when you go to a NICTAMS or an NCTS, those are our like naval computer telecommunication stations and things like that, and we have one in every major area of responsibility. So Hawaii NICTAMS pack pretty much controls the Pacific Fleet, all the IP services, all the emails, all the phones, all the internet browsing for Nippernet, Sippernet, and all that for the entire 183 at the time ships in Pacific Fleet.
Mm. Wow, that's pretty serious. That's a whole lot.
So yeah, so we got to get this qual out there called JIF Talk Watch Officer, and me, I'm loving Hawaii, surfing, doing stand up paddle boarding. My kids start surfing. We're going to the beach, but then I got to go back on that, 3 12-hour shift, and I got to study for this qual. And if I don't pass this qual, then you're a shit bag, and that's no good, and that's just not a possibility. So, unfortunately, my personality, I pissed off the wrong guy out there, who happened to be a retired lieutenant commander, LDO, same designator as me, and tough personality from New York City, his way or the highway. And, I think he caught me coming off of my third mid watch in the morning and having to sit into a meeting that I didn't want to be sitting in after being up awake all night long. And, we had a disagreement, which unfortunately kind of changed the trajectory for me at that command, because he had a lot of control as a GS 14. And I share this with you and your listeners because this is another thing that I'm trying to work on now that I'm, almost 45 years old or whatever, is being strategic with your words and your actions and your body language and things like that. And that's another one of those things that I've had to work on, and I still need to, do a lot more work on to improve that aspect of my life, because I can rub somebody the wrong way with a look or an expression or whatever. So this man, Tommy, and I had a disagreement about, something that was stupid. It shouldn't even have gotten to the point that it did. But here I am, this Lieutenant JG LDO that just came off of being on a carrier for 3 years and going through all the stuff that I just did. And I didn't want to hear what he had to say, and he didn't want to hear what I had to say. And we just met at the wrong time. But, anyways, I didn't pass the qual. And then an opportunity was volunteered/voluntold to me to go deploy to Africa to do a deployment with the USNS Spearhead to pull over into a Western Africa the deployment was called Africa Partner Station 2016. So flew back from Hawaii back to Virginia Beach, my old stomping grounds, and went through some schooling and things like that. And then we deployed on the ship. So again, here I am now away from my wife and kids for an additional 6 months, and I don't have that qual. Well, so I came back from that deployment, and during that deployment, I found out that my father was really bad off. He had had some knee surgeries and things like that, and due to the issues that he was having, he got MRSA in his knee.
Ugh.
So he ended up being in the hospital for like 6 weeks on antibiotic drip, and they had to remove the hardware out of his knee, and then do another operation to put it back in there, and then another blood infection happened. And meanwhile, my wife and kids are in Hawaii. I'm on deployment in Western Africa, in Ghana. We're pulling into Gabon, Senegal, Cameroon, all these places. My wife's mom and sister back in my hometown really stepped up and tried to look out for my dad, because I don't have any other family members really to say of, back in Roanoke that were, really doing anything or whatever. So my wife's mother, who's like my mother, and, my sister and things like that, really stepped up and helped him out. But when I came off that deployment, I went back to Roanoke, and, he's like really bad off, like probably having to go into a nursing home and can barely walk, and things like that. So here, adding on to like your mental health stuff with depression and anxiety and obsessive compulsive and different things like that, I'm now having to fly back to Hawaii and go back and try to get back on that watch bill and get that qual, or else you're a shitbag, right? You
Yeah.
can't, if you don't get bosun's mate of the watch qualified or master helmsman
Then
qualified
you
as a
suck.
BM2, you're right. So here I am. But this is when I finally, at that time, reached out to get like mental health treatment. So they sent me down to the psych center on Pearl Harbor or whatever, at the medical center to speak to a psychiatrist or whatever. So she put me on some sort of medication that I don't even remember what the name of it was, but it was supposed to help me, like, because we're on the watch bill all the time, going from days to nights, and things like that. She thought this was going to help me or whatever, but and I went to speak to my commander at the time, my OPSO, my department head. I was like, hey, look, I just came off this deployment. My wife and kids are here. My dad's back in Roanoke. He's like almost gonna die because he's got freaking MRSA and blood infections, and he can't even take care of himself. Like I can't deal with this right now. I can't go back on this watch bill and try to get this qual, because it's just killing me. It's just kicking my ass.
Yeah.
And he I'm going to take care of you, Brandon, and all that. Well, meanwhile, I'm put back onto the watch bill, and I'm not taken care of. And I'm fighting to get this qual knocked out. And unfortunately, being gone for 6 months doesn't help you with like retaining information and memory and being able to explain everything and things like that. So that CO of that command, that '06, ended up leaving. But while he was the CO and I got fitness reports at that command, they were bad, right? So, because I never got the qual. So
Mm.
he left. We got a new CO came in named Herman Archibald, who was a legend in our community. Had been around since the '80s, worked his way up from RM Seaman recruit to RMC, and then put on LDO, and is now an '06, and he's the CO of this command. And the other guy wasn't an IP. He was a like a cryptologic warfare guy or something. So I really didn't have a relationship with this person. But fortunately, when Captain Archibald came in, he really genuinely cared about his folks, whether it's his wardroom, his chief's mess, his junior enlisted sailors, or whatever the case may be. Captain Archibald was a completely different person. So I developed a really good relationship with him, and ended up getting the qual, knocked out. He ended up taking care of me, putting me into like a department head position and things like that. So here I am now, lieutenant, getting to be the department head of an '06 Major Command in Hawaii for my last year out there. And then I'm like, well, because I did that IA to Africa, shouldn't I get an additional 6 months here? And then, of course, the detailers are like, well, I mean, normally that's for like junior sailors to kind of pull that trick. But I mean, if you really want to do that, I'll do it for you. But I don't think it's a good idea. I think you should leave there and, go back to sea or, whatever. And here I am, in Hawaii, really enjoying myself. Finally, I'm working a normal Monday through Friday job. Everything's going really well. But another thing happened while I was in Hawaii that for our community, they came out and they said, we're basically going to get rid of all the LDOs. So you have to cross over to your regular line officer designator of 1820 for like a regular information professional. Like you'll no longer be a limited duty officer. But in order to do that, you have to have a bachelor's degree. And earlier on in my career, probably as an E5, as an E6, I was pretty adamant about trying to knock out my education as much as possible. I got my associate's degree when I was an E6 back in 2009. But then after that, I was just constantly deployed with the SEALs, deployed on the George H.W. Bush. And now I'm in, Hawaii working this rotating watch bill. So now I have to get this bachelor's degree knocked out, or basically there's no upward mobility. You can't make the next pay grade unless you get this bachelor's finished. So another stressor to add on to not only, being a dad, being an officer, being a sailor, being a husband, and then living in an environment that's, completely almost on the other side of the world than, anybody that you grew up with, and milk is, $10 a gallon in Hawaii and things like that. So it has its own set of stressors and things like that. So
Absolutely.
I'm trying to knock this bachelor's degree out, but it's going to take me some time. And the detailer, he did look out for me at the time. My detailer is now Billy Young, who's another legend in our community, LDO, prior chief, been around for 30 plus years. He's like, Brandon, I'll let you stay out there for that additional 6 months, but you're not going to get these orders to go back to Little Creek, because I had picked to go to a Fibron for my '03 Lieutenant Sea Tour. I was going to go back and be like a Fibron N6. He's like, I'm going to have to take those away because we have to fill somebody else. So if you stay there for an additional 6 months, that'll now change your PRD to the summer. And the only thing that I really have available for you is to go back to a CVN in San Diego or Norfolk or Washington State, and I think maybe the Reagan was offered to me to go to Japan, and that was kind of like out of the question as far as my wife and kids. Like they wanted to come back to Virginia. I wanted to come back because my dad's basically in a nursing home and all that, and I don't have anybody else. Like I don't know if I told you that earlier, but I don't have any brothers and sisters, and my dad didn't have any brothers and sisters. So like I'm my father's only living relative.
Yeah, you got to take care of your dad.
Yeah. So, but like I said, going back to a CVN as a Divo, as a lieutenant, I've already done that. So the other opportunity was to go to Bahrain for a year and unaccompanied and be the fleet combo of Fifth Fleet. And I don't know if you remember this, but when I told you I got those initial orders to go to the Bush as an ensign, they did not let me take that, that billet was given away to somebody else because I was too junior at the time. But now here's my opportunity as an IT, as an IP officer to be the commo. That's where it's at. That's like being the bosun or the AFL on, as a bosun's mate or whatever,
Big dog
right?
status. Yeah.
So I'm Fifth Fleet combo. or I'm going to be the Fifth Fleet Commo. So I got to leave Hawaii, fly back to Georgia, and go to school down in Georgia with the joint, like a joint school with a bunch of Army, Air Force, and things like that. So fly back to Georgia, go to my month-long school down there, meet the top tier communicators in the military, our Marine chief warrant officers, Army chief warrant officers, Air Force officers, Air Force senior enlisted folks. So we got senior enlisted and LDOs and CWOs from all the other services, and I'm the only Navy guy there. And
Wow.
going back to Hawaii to Nick Tam's pack, that was a tough tour for me because I couldn't get that qual. It took me a lot longer than it should have, but it made me a way better communicator than I realized at the time, because when I started that school, they gave you a pre-test and I got the highest score out of the entire class over, Marine chief warrant officers, Army chief warrant officers, Air Force, so on and so forth. And we also had Israeli communicators in that class. But anyways, not to brag on myself, but
You should be
that
proud of you should be
tour,
proud of your accomplishments, man. This not be a
yeah,
braggadocious whatsoever.
yeah. I mean, for that tour coming out of Hawaii, um, to cut the highest score out of a class like that, when I'm talking, there's master gunnery sergeants and gunny sergeant majors and things like that are in that class that are the premier communicators for their branch of the service, dealing in our world, like signals and comms and things like that. So that for me was a big deal. And then, so I go out to Bahrain, and I'm out there for a year, trying to knock this bachelor's degree out, because if I don't get this bachelor's degree knocked out, there's no chance of, making the next pay grade. So started University of Maryland, University College at the time, but then while I was out there, it changed to University of Maryland Global Campus, right? With the air quotations, right? So I'm trying to knock that out. I'm in my last class. I sit down with my '06 out there, Steve Averett, who's also a famous LDO guy's been in the Navy at the time, like 37 years or something like that. He's like, Brandon, you're not going to make '04 because you got these shit fit reps from that '06 that you worked for when you first got to Hawaii, and I'll show you why. And he laid out all my paperwork, my performance summary, my officer data card, and all that stuff to kind of break that down and show me why that was not going to happen. And I didn't know any of this at the time. That basically they can send a message to the board like, "Hey, don't pick this guy," because remember I pissed that guy off, right? So I think that's what it was. I really don't know, because I had very limited interaction with that '06 while I was out there. But I thought, taking the IA to Africa and doing that deployment and things like that, they would at least looked out for me, or had the been man enough to sit there and be like, I don't think you're good enough or whatever, instead of secretly kind of screwing you over on your fitness report. And I'm sure I've listened to your podcast long enough,
Yeah, a couple people have gone through something
evaluations.
similar. Yeah. Piss poor
So
leadership is something that's got to go. We can't have it in the military at all.
be a man or a woman or whatever, a big boy, and tell me straight up, hey, I don't think you're smart enough, or I don't think you're classy enough, or whatever the case may be. And
Yeah.
in the wardroom is a different animal than coming up the ranks as an enlisted guy, because I was enlisted for 12 years, and that's what I came in the Navy, aircraft carrier, IT on an aircraft carrier, and my experience. So some of these games and strategy and things like that, I still haven't been able to figure out. Anyways, I finished my bachelor's degree. I'm sorry, let me take that back. I'm in my last class. I submitted a letter to the board, and I had to get this '06 back in Hawaii to kind of give me a letter explaining why I had those 3 fit reps that were, not too pretty. And he kind of, I won't say he messed with me, but he made me work for it. to like basically say, I didn't get the qual on time. This is why this happened. However, since, the new CO came on board, the individual was able to get the qualification and, promoted into a department head position and so on and so forth. So here's another, stressor thing that I, talked about initially with the suicide, going through all these different inspections and things like that. And now it's like, you have to get your bachelor's degree or basically you're going to be stuck. And, and I had dreams and aspirations of, being Captain Wilson or Captain McGee or Captain Averett or Captain Archibald or whatever. And, so that's basically going to stop me in my tracks. And so I'm in my last class at University of Maryland Global Campus. I submitted a letter to the board. I came back from Bahrain in the summer of 2019 and checked on board to the schoolhouse here on Dam Neck Base. And that's where I've been at for the last 3.5 years. And
Wow.
so I found out I made O4 and I think it was August of 2019. And then, that was, major life accomplishment for me. Super happy. I got my bachelor's degree finally at 41 or however old I was, and but meanwhile, I'm driving to work in the morning, and I'm just like freaking out about the stupidest, small, minuscule things that I see as I'm driving to work in the morning, and I can't figure it out. So, and I'm also now been away from my wife and kids for an entire year while I was in Bahrain. And now I'm linking back up and we're moving back into our house in Virginia Beach. And my wife is used to running the show in Hawaii by herself, raising two kids while I'm, out in the Middle East for an entire year. So we didn't have the best transition back into living together and all that. And,
Yeah, it's hard.
meanwhile, I'm dealing with this anxiety and which is now I kind of turned into a pretty good amount of depression. And it's weird and I can't really explain it, but I'll give you an example. Because I came up in the Navy as an enlisted guy in Norfolk on the George Washington, that's the Navy that I knew. Like, you didn't shave in the morning, somebody was going to get into your ass, some chief or first class or whatever the case, or a warrant or an LDO or whatever the case may be. Your haircut's not right, somebody's going to get into your ass. Your uniform's not right, your shoes look like shit, whatever the case may be. So, a little bit different than I think your community, where, as far as, you guys are out there really, doing God's work out on the weather decks and taking care of the ship and stuff like that. But as an IT, working in radio or ADP or whatever, your shit's got to be squared away, right?
Mm.
Boots, all that stuff, right? So that's the Navy that I know, but that's not the Navy that it is now. So in the morning I'm driving to work and I just see the like most ridiculous things that would like set me off or whatever. And I'll tell you a funny story and you're going to get a kick out of this, but I'm driving in one morning and I dip Copenhagen and I drink coffee every day. Like, that's just the way it is. And I have to have those things or, it's not going to be a good day. So I get up and it's like a perfect storm. There's no more coffee and there's no more dip. So I'm driving on the base and I stop at the little gas station and I'm buying my cup of coffee and my can of dip. And as I'm walking out, there's two chief warrant officers walking with flight suits on with no covers by the Navy Exchange, your little mini mart or whatever.
Open
And
fire.
they both have George H.W. Bush patches on their flight suits. So of course, that's my last ship. And I'm like, and they're both like younger, like probably CWO2s or whatever. And I'm like, yo, like, we're not wearing our fucking covers, like, like what the hell's going on here? And they're like, yeah, shit happens or whatever. And I was like, yeah, that's really good, man. Let's let all the junior sailors that are going to A school in this base see that. Like, that's how, things are done, you know, and probably 90% of everybody else doesn't care about things like that. But, that, like I said, that's who I am. And that's the Navy that I was raised up into. And
Standards
then,
are standards. If you keep lowering them, they're not gonna have shit.
right. Yeah. So I'm thinking, but different communities have different cultures and things like that. Aviation, SEAL team, whatever the case may be, everybody's got their own little stuff, right?
Mm.
So my next thing, I'm driving from that little gas station into the parking lot where we have a lot of junior sailors coming out of A schools and things like that, going to C schools and things like that in our building. And I see this kid walking with these big pair of like Oakley wraparound, like iridium colored shades, like up on top of his cover. And I just stopped my truck and I looked over at him and he looked at me in my eyes and he like took the sunglasses off real quick. And then I proceed to the parking lot and this other kid's getting out of his car and his US flag is like upside down on his uniform. And I just stopped and I looked at him. I was like, check your patch. And he looked over and he said, oh, my bad, da da da. And I'm like, dude, what the hell's going on here? I think I'm in the
Yeah.
Twilight Zone. So I'm getting up to pull into like our little designated parking spots that we have that are like closer to the building because the majority of all the folks in my office are all LDO, Chief Warrant Officer, Mustangs that are all instructors for, junior officers. So we have our own little parking spot there, but the new captain of the command that owns the building decided like, well, we're not going to honor that anymore. And so now their younger E5s and E4s and things like that are parking in those spots just to be like vindictive little pricks. So this kid is parked in this spot, and I looked over at him, and he had fucking white Crocs on, and I'm like, "Yo, what the hell is going on here?" So I like parked my truck, and I like got out, and I walked up to him. I go, "What are you doing?" And he's like, he this kid says to me now. Meanwhile, I'm an '04 Mustang. I'm about 270 pounds, and I'm 6'3", and I don't look like a kid or whatever. This kid said to me, "You don't fucking dictate to me what I do in my personally owned vehicle or whatever." And I lost all control, man. I said, MFer, I control and dictate what you do in that uniform 24/7, no matter where the fuck you're at in this world. I don't know what the fuck Navy you came into, but that shit is not fucking acceptable whatsoever. Like you're walking around in your NWUs with fucking white Crocs on, changing in the fucking parking lot or whatever. And like I said, probably 99% of your listeners or
Are
whatever
gonna
are gonna
laugh
think
because that's happened to them.
so. Basically we go back and forth, and I definitely stepped over the line as far as like my professionalism and things like that. So I went in and talked to a CMC. I was like, "Hey, look, Master Chief, I definitely like cussed this kid out, and I was pretty like, I went over the top on him, but he was not, he was being disrespectful back to me, So he's like, no problem, sir. I'll take care of it. It's all good." And then so back to that mentorship thing, right? OS2 and we're tight now. We're tight. He said, "Sir, I apologize." He goes, "We're just two alphas that met at the wrong time or something like that."
Something like
And
that.
we're good now. So I see him all the time. And I love him, and he's he doesn't wear those white Crocs anymore, but the entire my entire department, got a big kick out of that story, and would decorate the office and put like pictures of white Crocs up for like
Oh
Christmas.
yes.
And my class, because I was a division officer of each class that would come through, we would have anywhere from 15 to 25 officers in the class, and probably every 6 months or every year you're basically a class divo for 5 months while the junior officers are going through the course. So they bought me a statue of a white crocodile head on top of a mounted thing that said Lieutenant Commander Brandon Urick, class, 220, whatever class number it was. Thank you for the mentorship and things like that. So that was
I
it. It
love
was
it.
a funny story. It was a funny story, but like it just set me off, man. And that, that's that, like that churn thing where I'd get so worked up over stupid things. And then, over the last year or two, I kind of realized, I was like, man, I don't know if I can go back to sea and do this anymore. Like with the way the Navy has changed
Mm-mm.
and things like that, I would just be constantly like getting into it like that over things that, probably an 04 shouldn't care about or shouldn't even see in the first place or whatever. And I always have all my chief buddies, senior chief buddies, mass chiefs, and everybody like, sir, you don't need to be concerned with things like that. And I'm like, you're right. You're right, chief. I should not be. However, every single day I see this nonsense, like kids walking through the parking lot, smoking vape, blowing out, a cloud of smoke or whatever. And I just came in the Navy where you smoked in the smoke pit, and when you're done smoking, you walk back into the building or whatever. You're not walking through the parking lot eating a bag of Doritos or Cheetos or whatever that, case may be. And you know,
Times have
continuing
changed.
on that continuing on that mental health journey, going to counseling and now taking like an antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication or whatever. I'm starting to think like, hey, I don't think I want to do this anymore
Mm.
because I don't know if, like uh, something's going to set me off when I'm out to sea and I'm just going to freaking lose my mind or whatever
Yeah.
because nobody seems to give a shit anymore or follow any kind of standard or whatever that, I think in my head of the way things should be. And, so I get orders as an 04. We have an 04 milestone list that comes out each year. And once you make 04, you pick with the detailer on what job is, are you going to get? And me, I'm like, I want to stay in Virginia. I don't want to move anymore. I've already been to Hawaii. I've already been to Bahrain, and I want to, go back to sea on a carrier as a CISIO or go, to a strike group or whatever. So I put in my list, and the detailer comes back, gives me, probably the best job I could possibly have as a strike group commo on strike group 12 that's going to be a part of the Gerald Ford. And Gerald Ford really doesn't go out to sea a lot. When they do, it's, whatever. So I get those orders and I'm getting ready to transfer. I do the sea duty screening, and the doc, the commander, medical doctor or whatever was like, Brandon, you're not fit to go back to sea. And I was like, all right, okay. And he's like, how do you feel about that? I was like, honestly, I think it's probably the best decision for myself and my family and for the Navy, because I don't know if I have it in me anymore, you know, because I've had, knee issues, feet, back, lower back issues, shoulder. I just had a shoulder surgery. I'm probably
Mm.
going to have an operation on my foot, which is, really irritating because I still haven't fully recovered from the shoulder surgery. And I know you're into
Yeah.
jujitsu, and that's actually how that happened, from doing jujitsu and rolling with like a younger 20-some-year-old corpsman. And, here I am, 40, whatever, 42, 43 at the time, and something tore in my shoulder.
Oh.
So I kind of babied my shoulder for a good year, going to, get cortisol shots and things like that. And it got to the point where I knew that I was going to have surgery because I couldn't imagine being on a ship and having to like dog a airtight door when I can barely like lift up, a bunch of bags of groceries to take them into the house and things like that.
Yeah.
So basically the commander, like, I'm not approving you to go back to sea duty. You're not passing your sea duty screening. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So I kind of like accepted that. And, here I am, I put in my retirement package this past fall, and it got approved a couple months ago. I was super blessed and super fortunate to be able to get a skill bridge before the new nav admin just came out, changing it, basically making it more stringent and kind of shortening down the days. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that program, but basically it gives me 180 days before I retire to go work for whatever company and learn how to be a civilian for 180 days before I actually officially retire and have to go get a job and things like that.
Good.
So that's what I'm doing right now, and it's super blessed. I'm super fortunate. I was able to hook up with a company off of a Facebook post on combat systems jobs on the Facebook thing. Um, and I hooked up with this lady that used to be a naval officer, went to the Naval Academy. She was a SWO, 10 or 15 years ago or whatever. I'm not exactly sure. But I hooked up with her, and she basically took my resume and gave it to the vice president. And the owner of the company, the president, Mr. Klett, is a retired captain. He retired back in the 90s, and he went to the Naval Academy back in the 70s. And a lot of the folks at the company are prior naval officers, chiefs, junior enlisted, and things like that. So I'm super blessed right now that I have the opportunity to work for this company for the next couple months before my terminal leave starts. And yeah,
It's good
and
to have
here
a
we
smooth
are.
transition. Smooth transitions are important. I know that so many other veterans, like myself included, we struggled with the transition out of the military. And it's not that it's easy to walk off a ship. It's easy to walk away from a base or drive off base or whatever. It's not easy to re-identify who you are, what your path is. Are you a provider for your family? What do you do? What's your job? Is your job your identity? Can you separate your identity from that? All these things definitely come into play.
Right. And I really, I think I discovered you and your podcast about listening to Jeff Bayless's podcast. And, that was another thing I wanted to talk about because back in Hawaii, when I was struggling to get that qual, I kind of stumbled onto the Jocko podcast and kind of really got into Jocko podcast. And I've been it's been very inspiring to me what he does. And then, I found out about Jeff's podcast because a friend of mine named Amari Ponciano, who was actually on the USS Cole when it got bombed back in 2000, he was also an IT. We went to ITA school around the same time and served together, 20 some odd years ago. And he's now a Master Chief. But Amari was on Jeff's podcast. So I found out about Jeff, saw some of the great things he was doing, going around talking to the sailors, telling his story. And then I think he had you on, and I found your podcast, and I really connected with you, your stories of being on the carrier and different things like that. So I think we hooked up on Facebook, and I've been kind of following your journey for the last year or two. And, I just wanted to say to you, I really appreciate what you do, and I really admire it because you give people a chance to kind of hear stories that they might, resonate with or identify with and things like that. And I've been listening to your podcast, and you've had some really cool guests on, and I'm feel very fortunate that you gave me the opportunity to be on here. And I just wanted to say to you, I appreciate what you do for the veteran community, and I admire you. And I, again, feel very fortunate that you allowed me to kind of share my crazy little tale.
Man, I do appreciate you saying that so much. It means the world to me that you tap in pretty frequently. I love all my listeners, but to have somebody who listens to a couple come on and be a guest and share their personal journey is what I hope for everybody. I hope everybody listens and wants to come and talk. But yeah, I've had a bunch of amazing guests. I have an amazing guest on right now. Your journey is filled with different things that a lot of people don't know. A lot of people don't listen into and get to hear what does an average military experience look like. There's no such thing. Everybody has
No.
a individual journey, and there's ups and downs, and I'm really am glad that you are taking your time to step away from the military. There's so many huge veteran agencies out there that would love to help you transition out. I really do encourage you to watch the Emerging Veterans and Players movie because I'm a part of MVP here in Seattle, in the Seattle area, and it's definitely helped me. Having that camaraderie after you leave the service is essential, man. And especially just having a support system. So people kick back, drink a couple beers with here and there. I don't usually drink beer. I drink whiskey, but I can get down with a beer every now and then, I think. So it's great. It's great to have a team. And you brought up a lot of names. I think that you should, make sure you stay close to all of them because they are all a part of your family. We become a family out at sea. We do. And and on land too as well. I think there's nothing more important than the people who we connect with originally, and keeping that bond strong is important as we transition out so that we can prevent mental health issues. So we can let other people know that when you leave the military, you still have a family of people who care about you, and you don't need to pass the pain or give up on life. You still have breath in your lungs, and once you go to the military, you've gone to the best university the world has to offer ever.
Yeah, I'm super fortunate. My Navy experience has been, awesome. I'm walking out of here with an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, and now a master's degree. And, my resume, I utilized Hire Heroes to get my resume writing, wrote for me and, submitted that to that company and, was taken on board, from that resume that was written by that lady that's, helping vets out and things like that. And then, recently attended TAP course a couple months back and found out about the USO Pathfinder Transition Specialist, and just all the different services that you don't get a lot of training on while you're active duty until you start to transition. So survivor benefits plan, life insurance policies, all the different free like courses that are available through LinkedIn Premium, which I've been trying to take advantage of, as much as I can recently and things like that. So yeah, and I haven't really discussed this with anybody, Eddie, but I have been really thinking about doing not what you're doing per se with a podcast, but I would really like to be able to help um, people, whether that's a veteran or active duty or just a regular person, So I've been really thinking about that a lot lately because that's something that I've truly enjoyed, especially over the last 3.5 years that I've been an instructor at the schoolhouse and kind of guiding and mentoring junior officers and things like that. And, I also did a lot of LDO, chief warrant officer, chief mentorship to get folks into those programs and selected for, whether it's getting somebody selected for chief or LDO or chief warrant officer or applying for the Seaman to Admiral program or whatever it is, those have been the moments for me throughout my almost 24 years now that, I look back and I'm super proud and happy that I was able to help, the folks that I was able to help. And so I'm trying to figure out what that means right now, as I have several more months before my terminal leave starts, how I can, what I can do to, put myself in that position because that's, something that I really enjoy doing. And again, what you do and what Jeff Bayless and all these other veteran organizations and things like that do to help people. I just need to figure out what my little my thing is going to be though, but I'm in the market trying to figure that out.
Well, let's link up after this because I think I have a couple of different resources that you might kind of take their idea and recreate it, or just join with the organization because I don't think there's one of any of the two organizations I'm thinking about in your area at all. Uh, it's a huge military area where you're at right now, so you
Yes.
might as well take advantage of being able to touch 1,000. You can affect thousands of people just by having a little bit of time in your day to care, right? So I think that's where the most beautiful thing about this is. My last question for you is, if there is one way for you to sum up the term service and sacrifice, what would it be?
Honor, courage, commitment, the Navy core values, having the honor, having the courage, having the commitment. I know that sounds kind of cliche or, whatever, but, I try to live my entire naval career by that. You know, I've definitely made some mistakes and things like that, but yeah, honor, courage, commitment. I wish I could come up with a better thing to say, but you know, that's what I've lived for the last almost 24 years.
I think that's the perfect answer then. I want real, raw, authentic answers. I don't want you to come up with something that might sound good. I want the pure version of who you are, my brother. Well, I definitely appreciate your insight. I love your story. I really caught a couple laughs at a couple parts. Man, look out for
The
them
white
white Crocs.
Crocs.
They got to stay away from them. They're gonna get you every time. Um, where can people find you if they try to get a hold of you?
Well, I have a Facebook. I keep everything kind of private though. I don't want everybody to be able to see everything that I do and posting. I have Instagram, Big Brandon Urick, because my son is Brandon Jr., so he's little Brandon Urick or Lil, like Lil. And then LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is what I've been using mostly lately to communicate with people and kind of building that professional network to try to figure out, you know, the civilian transition. So LinkedIn's probably the best platform right now. Um,
Excellent. Well,
yeah,
I'll make sure to put your LinkedIn link in the description as well, so people in that region who are listening can connect with you and get you started. Well,
yeah,
I just
that's
want to
awesome.
say, yeah, 100%, my brother. I think there's no reason why you shouldn't be connected with veteran service organizations across the states and also in your region as well. So I appreciate your time, my brother, so much. Thank you so much for jumping in and expressing the different things you went through, because every story there's something to take away from it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, my brother. And thank you to each and every person listening in. This has been another episode of Off the Even Podcast. If you like Brandon's story, you know exactly what to do. Share it with somebody else. This is meant to be a conversation starter. What have you experienced in your military journey? Do you know any veterans? Maybe ask them. You'd be so surprised what stories you hear when you ask somebody else about their life experience. I hope all of you are doing great. As always, if you are in a negative mind space at the time, please do reach out to somebody, because your life has value. And if you're looking for a reason not to give up today, look in the mirror, because you are enough. Much love, y'all, and bye bye.